Tam stapitam yena bhutale swayam rupa kadamayam dadati swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Adipurush Prabhu, for being here, and all senior Vaishnavas here, and all assembled Vaishnavas here. I think Arjuna Prabhu is in Vrindavan, so I don't know if he's listening. So today we are reading, let's see, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 34, verses 10 to 19. So I will share my screen so that everyone can see the verses. And I'll just go through them, and then we'll talk about them. So I'll read the Sanskrit, I'll read the translation, and only some of them have purports, and the purports are very short, actually. And we already, the few verses before this, we were hearing this pastime of this snake, this Vidyadhara that was cursed to turn into a snake, trying to swallow Nanda Maharaj whole, and Krishna coming to save him, of course. And so now, with the touch of Shri Krishna's heel, that serpent transformed back into his original form, and now we're hearing kind of the aftermath of everything that just happened. So it says, Pam apracha drishikesha pranatam samavastitam dipyamanena vapusha purusham he mamalinam. The Supreme Lord Hrishikesha then questioned this personality who was standing before him with his head bowed, his brilliantly effulgent body bedecked with golden necklaces. The purport, the demigod was about to speak, and Lord Krishna wanted to focus everyone's attention on his words. Therefore, he personally inquired from the worshipable Vidyadhara who was standing before him with his head bowed. Ko bhavan paraya lakshmya rochate dbhuta darshana katam jugupsitam etam gatim va prapito vasha. Lord Krishna said, "My dear sir, you appear so wonderful, glowing with such great beauty. Who are you, and who forced you to assume this terrible body of a snake?" Sarpa uvacha aham vidyadhara kaschit sudarshana iti shrutaha shreya swarupa sampatya vimanena charandishaha rishin virupangirasaha prahasam rupa dharpita thairimam prapito yonim pralabdhai svena papmana. The serpent replied, "I am the well-known Vidyadhara named Sudarshana. I was very opulent and beautiful, and I used to wander freely in all directions in my airplane. Once I saw some homely sages of the lineage of Angira Muni. Proud of my beauty, I ridiculed them, and because of my sin, they made me assume this lowly form. Sapo me nugrahayaiva kritasthai karunatmabhi yadaham lokagaruna padasprishto hatau shubha. It was actually for my benefit that those merciful sages cursed me, since now I have been touched by the foot of the Supreme Spiritual Master of all the worlds and have thus been relieved of all inauspiciousness, which I hope. Tam twaham bhavabhidhanam prapananam bhayapaham aprachesha panirmukta pada sparshad amivahan. My Lord, you destroy all fear for those who, fearing this material world, take shelter of you. By the touch of your feet, I am now freed from the curse of the sages. O destroyer of distress, please let me return to my planet. Purport. According to the Acharyas, the word aprache indicates that Sudarshana humbly requested the Lord for permission to return to his abode, where he might take up his duties again, certainly in a chastened state of mind. Prapanosmi mahayogin mahapurusha satpate anujanihi mam deva sarva lokeshwareshwara. O Master of mystic power, O great personality, O Lord of the devotees, I surrender to you. Please command me as you will, O Supreme God, Lord of all lords of the universe. Brahma dandad vimuktoham sadyaste chuta darshanat yannama grihanan akilan Shrotrin atmanam evacha sadya punati kimbuyas tasyas prishta padahite. O infallible one, I was immediately freed from the Brahmana's punishment simply by seeing you. Anyone who chants your name purifies all who hear his chanting, as well as himself. How much more beneficial then is the touch of your lotus feet? Iti anugyapya dasharham parikramyabhivandhyacha sudarshano divam yataha krichranandaschamochita. Thus, receiving the permission of Lord Krishna, the demigod Sudarshana circumambulated him, bowed down to offer him homage, and then returned to his heavenly planet. Nanda Maharaj was thus delivered from peril. Last verse. Nishamya Krishnasya tat atma vaibhavam varajaukaso vishmita chetasastataha samapya tasmin niyamam punar vrajam nripayayustat katayanta adrita. The inhabitants of Vraj were astonished to see the mighty power of Sri Krishna. Dear King, they then completed their worship of Lord Shiva and returned to Vraj along the way, respectfully describing Krishna's powerful acts. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Okay, so we have a lot of verses. We have a lot of lessons here. I really am happy. I'm always happy teaching Bhagavatam and reading Bhagavatam. It's always a joyous occasion to do this. But sometimes one needs a break from heavy philosophy, which I feel like the past few weeks, the verses themselves, at least that I was teaching, called for some tattva, for some heavy philosophy to clarify certain things. But these verses, not so much, which I'm a little bit happy about, because we can get into some lessons here, some universal, beautiful lessons. So first of all, there's a lot going on here. There's a beautiful story of Sudarshan, who ridiculed in his past. The word in the translation that's used is homely, but if you go into the word for word translation, the word is deformed. Yeah, so he saw some deformed homely. We know what homely means, right? Like homely means like ugly, homely, deformed sages, and he made fun of them. And I'm laughing because I remember the moment that I read this verse. I know this is kind of like mundane, but I remembered like high school and junior high school, like all the cool kids who were like, good looking and this, and they would make fun of the ugly kids or the nerdy kids or whatever. And it kind of has this air to it, right? Like he's this, Sudarshan is this beautiful, opulent, what other descriptions were bedecked in jewels, Vidyadhara, heavenly demigod. and he saw these deformed, homely, ugly sages, and he decided that it would be a good idea to make fun of them. Yeah, and to specifically make fun of them. Why? Because he felt proud of himself, right? He felt pride in his own beauty, in his own illustriousness, and therefore he saw them as less than. He saw them as less than, and he decided that he would make fun of them. Not a good idea. Once he did that, they cursed him, and he became this serpent and lived like this for many, many, many years. Damodar Priya, I love it. Note to self, don't make fun of others, especially sages. Yes. If you are in India and you see some sadhus in the Himalayas, don't make fun of them. You never know what's going to happen. So let's see. There's a couple of points here that I want to touch on. First of all, some of these, I was reading some of the commentary from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and I think the first thing is that in that very first verse, after the serpent turns into his true form of the demigod, Krishna decides to kind of directly interrogate him. Yeah. And so we can understand that whenever Krishna is deciding to do something like this, like really get directly involved, it's because he wants to give everyone a lesson. Yeah. And so he is giving a lesson to all of the surrounding brahmanas and the pilgrims who had gathered from these various villages. And he wanted to instill fear in them. This is Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's words. He wanted to instill fear in them of disrespecting a brahmana. Yes. So this is a really important thing to understand right from the get-go, that Sri Krishna is really, really directly getting the story straight, so to say, from Sudarshan, right, the snake, to give an example to everyone else. And this being overly conceited and overly involved in one's looks, that is a lesson in and of itself that we could go on and on for. And actually, there's some really beautiful stuff here. So first of all, we understand from the most simple perspective, we're told from day one in our Krishna consciousness that we're not our body, that we're not our mind, that we're not our nationality, that we're not our, sex, gender, whatever, we're not any of those things, and that we're a spirit soul, and that our truest nature, savai pungsam paro dharmo, right, is the highest dharma. Our truest nature is to serve God, is to serve Krishna. So that is the highest truth in a tattva perspective, but in a practical lived reality perspective, where we are all every day battling our anarthas, or the unwanted desires that live in our heart, we might not be so in touch with that reality on an embodied practical level, right? And we're all at different stages. And so even though logically we might know that the jiva swarupa hoy krishnera nityadas, right, that the jiva's eternal constitution and position is to be the servant of Sri Krishna, the servant of the servant of the servant. Like, we might know this logically, but each and every one of us have a lived experience of being embodied, right, in a body. And in a specific body, right? My body is different than your body, is different than the other person's body. And so each body, each family, each conditioning, mental and emotional conditioning that we're born into, there's a reason for all of that, right? There's a reason why that person was born deformed and this other person was born beautiful. Yeah. And neither of the two, from a spiritual perspective, are better than the other, right? And this is where Sudarshan made a mistake, yes, because he became puffed up, as we like to say. And so, we hear these verses in Bhagavad Gita that the enlightened person sees pebbles and gold and all these material things as the same, right? It makes no differentiation between these things. But us, we walk through New York City or whatever city we might be in, and there's a lot of differentiation going on in our minds, right? This is beautiful, and my eyes are attracted, and wow, look at that person, and oh, look at that shiny bag or that shiny trinket. And then I see this other thing, oh, that's disgusting, that's terrible. Or we see, you know, a homeless person or a drug addict on the street. Ew, get away from me. No, don't talk to me. You know, like these are the impressions that go through the mind. Yes. And so maybe for us to understand Sudarshan a little bit better, we can think of rhetorically, you don't need to nod along, but you can think of a time in your life where maybe you were approached by someone that is quote unquote undesirable, right? And what I mean by that is society has deemed them as undesirable, right? Not that they are. And what is the feeling? You know, what is the feeling that you get in your body and your heart? There might be a feeling of backing away, of, ooh, what is this? Or I don't know, right? I remember, I wasn't even planning to tell this story, but I'll call myself out. It's fine. I remember when Jahnavi first came, well, this was her second time in New York, when she came to live in the Bhakti Center in the ashram. When I was living there, I think this was in 2017, 2018, something like that. And she had been to New York before, but it had been a very long time since she had been. And so I was staying there, and I was living there with Jai Jagannath and others and like this. And I remember there was one time where the three of us were kind of like walking in the street right around the corner from the Bhakti Center. And as you all know, there's a Catholic workers charity there that distributes food. And therefore there's a lot of, you know, homeless people or people going through it who need this kind of assistance. And I remember Jahnavi just being like, her heart was just breaking. She was just like, oh my God, like these poor people. And I don't know, I want to talk to each and every one of them. And I want to do something, and etc. And Jai Jagannath and I were both of the camp of, no, stay away. Like, we don't know who these people are. We like, absolutely not, you know? And we were kind of telling Jahnavi, like, you'll see, like New York you'll become jaded soon enough. And she was like, no, but my heart is breaking for each and every person, and et cetera, and whatever. So obviously she had the more, you know, enlightened point of view. And for me, it was kind of just like, no, I don't want to be near these people, right? And so the reason I call myself out in this situation is because this is a really good example for us to look at any time in our life where we have judged someone based on their appearances. Any single time in our lives where we have judged someone based on their appearances, whether their appearances were attracting us, whether their appearances were moving us away or driving us away, right? And this is actually quite an interesting topic, because appearance doesn't necessarily mean like what might be attractive for me might not be attractive for you. What might be, what's it called? I don't want to use the word, let's see. What might push me away might be different than what might push you away. So when I first read these verses that we were talking about, and specifically like this whole beauty topic and him being proud, Sudarshan being proud of his beauty, I thought of from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Pundarika Vidyanidhi. So some of you might not know who that is if you haven't gone into Chaitanya Charitamrita, but he became the guru of Sri Gadadhar Pandit. And won't go into too much detail about like the Leela or this or how he became the guru, etc. But to make a very long story short, he was a very, very wonderful, beautiful personality. I was reading in some of my research that I didn't even know this. I knew the main story, but I didn't know that in the Gauda Ganodesha Deepika, Pundarika Vidyanidhi is described as the father of Srimati Radharani in Krishna Leela. And so therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu treated him as his father. So anyway, Gadadhar Pandit was sent to go see him and to go, learn from him. And upon seeing Pundariki Vidyanidhi, he thought he was going to see this great spiritualist. He thought he was going to see this enlightened, being, totally detached, totally renounced, etc. And the person that he saw externally, according to him in his mind at first glance, was someone that appeared to be the personification of sense gratification, right? Dressed in opulent silk clothing, fine oils in his hair and all over his body. His hair just beautifully combed and just every single detail. He was seated upon a huge silk cushion. He was smoking this water pipe. Like, it was kind of something really like out there, right? So of course, Gadadhar Pandit was like, what is this? I thought I was going to see some enlightened, renounced sadhu or something like this. And to his surprise, Gadadhar Pandit had some sort of like back and forth with him. He said, I thought that you were et cetera, and I came to you to learn about Krishna. And the second that he uttered Sri Krishna's name from his lips, Pundarika Vidyanidhi immediately fell to the ground in ecstatic symptoms, and immediately just went into this trance and started just mumbling the Mahamantra and just lost himself. And so at that point, Gadadhar Pandit realized, oh, this is a very high level devotee. This is not an ordinary person, right? And this is a really important lesson for us, because I think I touched on this maybe last class, but if not, I'll touch on it again. It's a very important lesson for us because what might be Maya for you might not be Maya for me, and vice versa, right? An enlightened soul might be able to go into a bar and absolutely not take any association from any of the people there. And he is so strong, or that person might be so strong, that just giving his association, their association to everyone. However, maybe like a Kanishta, a low-level devotee, let's call it that, might not have the same experience, right? They might think, oh, I can go into this bar, or I can go into this place where there's lots of sense enjoyment going on, and I'm not going to take any of that sense enjoyment, but that's not going to happen, right? And they might be affected deeply, or whatever it is. And so again, just coming back to that lesson of you can't judge a book by its cover, right? And something that I really appreciate about the Bhakti Center, I think this comes up in every class that I give, but something I really appreciate about the Bhakti Center is that this principle of you can't judge a book by its cover is really a lived experience in the Bhakti Center, or at least that's been my experience. That there is so many people, it's New York City. There's so many people coming from so many different walks of life. Oh, I'll tell this story. There's so many people coming from so many different walks of life that you literally just don't know. You don't know. Srila Radhanath Maharaj, every single time he comes to the Bhakti Center, before he enters into the Bhakti Center, he stops at, I think his name is James. He's a belt salesman that is on the street with a little table selling belts. And I don't know anything about this man. I don't know if he's homeless. He might be, he might not be. But he's very humble looking appearance, clothing, kind of like a makeshift little belt stand. And Radhanath Maharaj, every single time without fail, always stops there first and greets him and says hello to him and holds his hands. Yes, James. And so again, you can't judge a book by its cover. There is one story, I guess this is turning into story time. I like it. There's one story where Ananta Govinda, I think it was Ananta Govinda. I'm pretty sure it was Ananta Govinda. We were in a kirtan. And there was, and there's so many interesting personalities that come to Thursday night kirtan. You just never know who's going to show up, right? And apparently on this day, there were some like Latino gang looking type of men who came in with like the whole thing, like face tattoos, teardrop tattoos, like the whole thing. And they were there. It wasn't Anta Govinda. And they were there and they were kind of chanting, not chanting, like kind of like tough guy, really intense macho, like kind of scary looking. And when Ananta Govinda leads kirtan, he always loves to engage everyone, right? He always calls on everyone to chant. And I remember Ananta telling this story, and he was saying just like, I was scared to call on them because they look scary. But something, the holy name is so powerful. Krishna is so powerful that I just passed the mic along to them, even though I had no idea what was going to happen because they looked pretty scary. And they were holding themselves in a demeanor that was like, they weren't really chanting. They were kind of just like gangster kind of looking. And the second he passed them the mic, they just broke out in love and they just started singing and they just sang the Mahamantra and they just completely opened up, And so once again, can't judge a book by its cover. And we should not be roaming the city. We should really control our minds. We should not be roaming the city thinking, oh, this is pleasing to my eyes. Oh, that's not pleasing to my eyes. Because I want to get into the second point here. There was a verse. Let's see if I can. There was like 9 verses. So let me make sure which one it was. Yes. So in this verse 14, Sudarshan says it was actually for his benefit that the sages cursed him, since now he's been touched by the foot of Sri Krishna. And that's a really high level of understanding. I mean, he didn't realize that when he was a snake. He only realized it afterwards. But that's a really beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing for us to take away from these verses. Whatever hardships we might be going through in life, whatever difficulties we might be going through, can we see them as maybe not a blessing? Maybe we're not at that level. I'm not. Maybe not as a blessing. Queen Kunti's prayers, like she's praying, please bring all the calamities again, Krishna, so that I can see you. So maybe we're not at that level, but at least we can understand that Krishna's hand, Krishna's plan is moving things accordingly. And really my only job is to trust Krishna, to love Krishna, to surrender to Krishna, even though I might not understand his plan, even though it might seem very difficult in the reversals or in the hardships or in the frustrations that we might be going through. It is a really beautiful meditation to remember Krishna in those moments and remember that he is guiding everything. And the last point that I'll make is connected to this, because this Sudarshan, this demigod, he became very proud. He became very proud of his beauty. And pride versus humility is such an interesting thing, right? And so let's talk about this very quickly, because I do want to hear from everyone today, and we'll actually have time today since we're not getting into heavy philosophy. But pride versus humility. I'm sure we've all heard this kind of adage, right? That humility doesn't mean thinking less of oneself, but it means thinking of oneself less, right? So humility means I'm not putting myself in the center all the time. Humility means that I understand that I am not the proprietor of everything, that I am not the controller of everything. We learned this in Sri Ishopanishad, first verse, the Ishavasya principle, right? That actually it is Sri Krishna who is proprietor and I am servant, and that is my constitutional position. That is the constitutional position of the jiva. And so when I become proud of my beauty, of my education, of my money, of my whatever, it is as a result of my not understanding this principle, of my being disconnected from ultimate reality, of my having fear because I've turned away from Krishna, and therefore I look for satisfaction and comfort in material things, whether they be money or beauty or women or, education, like whatever it might be, right? There's that beautiful verse in Bhagavatam that says, fear arises in the living entity when he turns away from Krishna, right? So it's a really beautiful image, right? When I physically turn away from Krishna, who's always there, then that is when fear comes. And when fear is there, then I look for solace in material things, in Maya. And so pride, as a result of those things, is putting me at the center, right? Pride is, I think I'm the most beautiful. I think I'm the most rich. I think I'm the most smart or whatever. And therefore, I'm going to make fun of you. I'm going to look down on you. I'm going to ridicule you. You're nonsense, right? Like this. And, we don't need to get into many examples. You just have to go out in the street and look at the material world. That's how it is. Yeah. It's a constant one-upping, dog eat dog kind of world of just like, oh, I'm going to one-up you. No, I'm better than you. No, I have more than you. No, I'm this, etc. So the Krishna conscious understanding is that Krishna is at the center. Krishna is at the center. And my beautiful, beautiful service, constitutional position is to serve him. And this is really important, like the last thing I'll say maybe here, because I want to hear from everyone, is even in a relationship, not even, let's take out that word, in a relationship where like it's the most intimate thing when you're in a relationship with someone, Krishna is at the center. Krishna needs to be at the center, right? Because if I think that I'm the proprietor, this person is mine, right? We even talk like that. My partner, my this, my that. Then the idea turns into, I'm going to get full satisfaction from that person. And there's no one that can give us that full satisfaction except Krishna. And so this Ishavasya principle that Krishna is the proprietor and that we are the servant, this is something that we really need to not only understand logically, but embody. Yes? Because I might understand this at 7:15 in the morning on Bhagavatam class, and then I can go out into the street and be like, my car, my this, my whatever, it's all mine and you all this, right? So what is that? And that's very personal. That's why I'm not speaking too much on that. That gap between a logical understanding into an embodied realization, right? Jnana, vijnana. That's a personal journey. And each of us have different anarthas, different karmic backgrounds, different baggage, right? That we all need to go through. For some of us, it might be beauty, right? Like this Sudarshan, and we're challenged with that. For some of us, it might be, I don't know, money or status or fame or like whatever, right? Whatever it might be. When I first read these verses, I also thought of fourth stanza of Shikshastakam. Nadanam najanam na sundarim bhavitam. Nadanam najanam na sundarim. I just chanted this and now, of course, I forgot it. But I don't want any riches. I don't want any beauty, any beautiful woman, right? I just want your devotional service, life after life. Bhavatad bhaktira haituki twai. I just want unmotivated. I want that in my heart without any motivation for any return, right? That's that ahaituki. I don't want anything in return. Yeah, kavitamba jagadisha kamaye. Thank you. I don't want anything in return. I just want your devotional service. That's it. And so I'll end here because I've actually successfully left 10 minutes for comments and questions. Yay, I did it. But these are really nice verses because they remind us of this really simple lesson. And there's actually a lot of lessons in here, right? First, just to summarize that Ishavasya principle, understanding that Krishna is at the center, he is the proprietor of everything. 2, that we can't judge a book by its cover. 3, pride versus humility and the understanding between those two. And lastly, raising ourselves to a consciousness where we can see Krishna's hand moving in our lives, right? Just as Sudarshan afterwards said, wow, it was actually my great blessing that I was cursed, because now I got to be touched by you, Sri Krishna. So like this, thank you all so much, and we can have some time for questions and comments.
Thank you so much, Kishor Chandra Prabhu. And I just wanted to quickly reflect back to make sure that I kind of heard one of the big points that you did say was, like, pride keeps us away from Krishna, or could it even be said that pride pushes Krishna away? And that you were saying that that's true in any relationship, because Krishna is supposed to be in the center. So by having that pride, we're kind of pushing Krishna and others away in that way. So I was wondering if you could comment on my reflection, make sure that I understood that correctly.
Yeah, the way that I was understanding pride, especially from this example, from Sudarshan's example, is that this beauty belongs to me. This body belongs to me, this intelligence or whatever it is that I'm becoming prideful of, that it belongs to me, that it is mine, and that I am at the center. So the way that I understood pride is pride as opposed to this Ishavasya principle in Sri Ishopanishad that tells us actually Sri Krishna is the proprietor of everything. Actually, it is the constitutional position of the jiva to serve Sri Krishna. So pride is when I put myself at the center, when I forget this principle, and whether it's a relationship with someone else, whether it's just me in everyday life, it's me putting myself at the center and forgetting the Krishna part of it. And so that's going to look different for each and every one of us, right? Beauty, education, fame, a pretty voice, right? That's a really great example, especially for all of us. Like sometimes, especially when you're in Krishna consciousness, because that's why it's a really personal thing. I should feel excited, and there can be I don't even know, but there can be a pride when Krishna is at the center. I'm so proud of doing this amazing service for Krishna, and everything is so beautiful, and it's all for him. But that's really like an internal consciousness that can't be checked by someone, it can only be checked by yourself or by like a shiksha guru who's very, very close to you, who's observing you and being like, you're just putting on a performance of thinking that that's really nice for Krishna. Someone who really knows you to call you out and be like, that's not really what that is, right? So there can be, of course, a feeling of like excitement and doing things really beautiful for Krishna and offering Krishna the most beautiful things, the most beautiful kirtan, and etc. But the second that I start to put myself in the center, I'm the best kirtaniya. My voice is the best. I am actually just amazing, then that's when it shifts into not so good situations.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any questions or reflections for Kishor Chandra Prabhu? You can either raise your virtual hand, unmute yourself. Yes, Adi Purusha Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we just can't see you. Oh, wait, no, now you're...
Oh, well. Hare Krishna?
We can hear you.
Yeah, perfect class. You set the table, and then you brought it home. The inappropriate response, considering what I like and what I don't like. Krishna says to Arjuna Bhagavad Gita, everyone's born into this world based on desire and hate. That's our delusion. I like this, I don't like that, I like this, I don't like that. That's the setting the table of how a person can drift into a lower level. And then you brought it home, the whole idea of that if we're fixed, how can I please you, Lord? And Krishna says, no one is more dear to me than one who preaches this message. So when we have that switch turned firmly, I want to please you, Krishna. I want to please you. And we're fixed on giving Krishna consciousness, giving the holy name, giving a book, giving opportunity for devotional service, including people. Then when we see someone, Prabhupada's grace, Krishna's so wonderful, he's bringing us to the platform like the Goswamis. Dira Dira Janapriyo. They were beloved by the gentlefolk and by the ruffians. They didn't discriminate. Oh, this one looks nice. This is the low-hanging fruit. These are the nice, goody-goody people. It says even someone who is less than attractive, even if he approached those sages and said, "Oh, how can I encourage them in devotional service?" That would have been a better response. Anyway, you explained this all very clearly. We're just reflecting. That's the inappropriate way to respond, and the appropriate way is to, we're loving beings. And when we love Krishna, our genuine affection for every other living entity is there, Rupa Goswami says. Okay, well, glories to Prabhupada, it's already talked so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for your reflection, Adi Purush Prabhu. I always look forward to your reflections. And I think it's very important to, like Adi Purush Prabhu was saying, like, to really just remember, like, seeing that spirit soul, like Krishna, once we direct our service to Krishna and we direct our energies to Krishna, then that's when we start to see everyone as a spirit soul. We start to really see everyone not as their bodily features or this or that or whatever it might be, but we really start to see them as children of God, you know? And this is you know, for some of us, it might be harder, and for some of us, it might be easier. It's hard to see that person who offended us as a child of God. Oh, that, you know, they did this to me. How dare they? It's hard to see them as a child of God. But it really is an important thing, a lifelong journey of shifting our consciousness to really, really try and see this. And New York is kind of like the perfect testing grounds for that, because there's a lot to see.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Walking from, I was on a bicycle actually, going from the Bhakti Center over to 3rd Street for the guest program. And I saw this man on the street screaming and yelling. He had no shoes on, his feet were dirty, filthy, matted hair. His mind was so disturbed, he was yelling and everything. And I just went around and gave him a really great circumference as I went around by the bicycle, and just prayed for him as I went by. And I got over to the breakfast area and I started setting up prasadam for the guests. And I felt Krishna saying, "What about him?" I was thinking, well, Krishna, I prayed for him, but Krishna would not let me go. So I said, all right. So I got one of those triple chocolate cake donuts from the donut plant. I wrapped it in a napkin and I went over there. And he was screaming and yelling. He just threw a chair out in the middle of First Avenue. People were crossing the street to get away from him, you know. And I tried to get a little close. I thought, well, I'm just going to throw the donut at him, you know. I'm not going to go anywhere near this guy, you know. And then finally I said, all right. He couldn't even hear me. I went really up close. I said, "Sir, this is for you." And he stopped and he looked at me. He looked at the donut and he said, Thank you very much. And he went and sat down on the curb and he was taking prasadam. So I mean, if we try, Krishna will show us how to reach even somebody who, Rupa Goswami says, not just the gentle and the good, but everyone. Sama sabeshu bhuteshu. We're equally disposed to everyone. So we stay fixed on that, try not to discriminate on the ones we like and the ones we don't like. It's interesting. All glories to Prabhupada. Who did that? Who does that?
That was me in the street. Thanks, Adi.
You're welcome. We have so many stories like that. Want to hear another one? I was on the subway and this lady came on screaming and yelling in Spanish. And then she stopped and she looked up and down the car and she said, "And I hate white men!" And I was like, oh, great. And I was like, it was like I was the only Caucasian body in the vehicle. And she came over and stood right over me. And I said, well, I'm not exactly white. See, this is white. I'm sort of like tan, you know, light brown. No, she wouldn't laugh. And then she pulled out this huge knife, like a serrated kitchen knife with an 8-foot blade. And I was like, oh, I sunk down in the street. In the seat, I was thinking of just kicking her with both feet, but I didn't. But then I remembered, she pulled out the knife and then she started cutting her own throat with it. And there was this blood dripping down. There was a herringbone forming on her neck skin, you know. And I was like, oh my God, Krishna. And then I remembered I had a little prasadam in my pocket. I always used to carry that for people in the subway. So I took it out. I said, this is for you. This is for you. And she stopped cutting her throat and she took the prasadam. And then the train stopped. And everybody off the train, apparently they knew that there was some wild thing going on from the previous stop. And then everybody got off the train except this woman. I went running off the train. And then she came off and they said, everybody back on the train. Hundreds of people got back on the train. And then the police took her, and as they were dragging her away, she was taking prasadam. All glories to Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, are we going to have darshan? Because you unmuted yourself.
Take the whole thing.
Oh, really? You want to
Vigrahasya Govinda Purusham.
Okay, thank you so much, Adipurusha Prabhu, for the darshan. We always really appreciate that and the suspense, and we see them, and it's still so exciting every time. I just can't handle it. So thank you so much as well, Kishor Chandra Prabhu. And if anybody else has any last minute reflections or questions, this is your time to shine. If not, we will leave everyone for this mundane holiday weekend, prolonged holiday weekend for those of you who have off from work. And we hope to see you again tomorrow, because the Srimad Bhagavatam class every day, well, not all day, but somewhere it's all day, right? Around the world somewhere, Srimad Bhagavatam class is happening. So thank you so much. And we hope to see everyone tomorrow.